Happy Friday. Welcome back to another edition of Voyager Villains That Could Have Been Great. And today I wanted to talk briefly about the Sikarians from the first season Voyager episode Prime Factors. Now, Prime Factors, I think, really stands out in season one as one of the better examples of Voyager when they execute their premise properly. For those of you who aren't aware, Voyager encounters a ship that's sending out a distress signal. When they respond to that hail, they learn that they're the ones who are in distress, that a Sikarian magistrate named Laban is inviting them to come to his home planet for shore leave and rest and recreation. They learn that the Sikarians are a very hedonistic culture. They're a very advanced culture, and with a high level of technology, and more than that, a very high standard of living, where people are able to pursue their various pleasures. And from that, Anson Kim, who begins a romance with Udara, and one of the first times that Harry actually has something close to a relationship with someone that doesn't end up trying to kill him. They learn that the Sakarans have an incredibly powerful transporter technology that is capable of transporting people, in some cases, thousands of light years away. And with this technology, Voyager could get about 60% of their journey back to the Alpha Quadrant. And if they managed to learn how to replicate the technology, they could possibly get there back to the Alpha Quadrant within days. So this creates an interesting ethical dilemma that Janeway points out, that this is the first time they've been on the other side of the Prime Directive, because the Sikarians' canon of laws do not allow them to share their technology with outsiders. Now, this results in, but they are also fascinated in stories. And I think that's an interesting thing, that a culture that has become that advanced, but doesn't seem particularly expansionistic or aggressive, all their needs are met, so most people's lives are surrounded by pleasure or amusement, that they in turn have run out of stories. They've run out of things in their own culture and the cultures they've explored around them. So they're kind of marked by a desperation for something new. It kind of speaks to a hollowness or a stagnancy in their culture. And so one of the things they were very interested in is Voyager's library of Federation literature and folklore from all the different races in the Federation, a treasure trove. And they offered to trade that with the Sikarians for the transporter technology. Of course, the Laban is just dragging them along because them being their interest, the Sikarians. And more than that, he seems to have more than a passing romantic interest in Janeway. And I'll get to that in just a second. As a result, the Tuvok and several mutinous Voyager crew members, including Torres, Carey, and Seska, get the technology and try to use it, but unfortunately, it's not compatible with Federation technology. Now, the Sikarians were originally supposed to be a recurring nemesis for Voyager, but it's really hard to tell what angle they were going to go with that. Um, Granted, Voyager is guilty of illegally purchasing their technology. The fact that Janeway wasn't aware of that doesn't make Voyager any less guilty. And further, Voyager just kind of leaves. They don't confess. So I was wondering, how would the Sakarans have the reason or the ability to be a long-term threat to Voyager? Well, one, you have to look at in the episode, Laban's assistant, who makes the deal with Tuvok for the transporter and gets the Federation library, speaks to the wealth and prestige having this treasure trove of new stories to present to the public will get him. So if you look at it in those terms, Laban's assistant just bought the Star Wars franchise and now has a new audience to expose that to. This would definitely upset the traditional power structure that was going on with the Sikarians, and possibly would supplant Laban's power. And now you have a villain with the motivation to go after Voyager. Um, I believe his assistant, Jarrett, I'm probably saying the assistant's name's wrong. Jared and Udara, now with the stories, can now market that to the public and gain great power. This, in turn, with a culture uh, this hedonistic and this kind of culturally hungry, might create a demand that they can't meet. They may become fascinated with Voyager and the Federation and all the different races and all the different legends and folklore, and may seek to pursue Voyager to get more. More than that, Laban is now been outmaneuvered by his assistant and is out in the cold while his assistant is gaining prestige and probably a great deal of wealth. Well, the Sikarians do have the teleportation technology to go as far as 40,000 light years away, which means they could theoretically be a thorn in Voyager's side for a great deal, but not because Laban wants to destroy Voyager or hurt Voyager, but instead he wants to continue to engage with them by making them the story, by feeding their exploits back to a hungry public, a hungry audience back on his planet. And so Laban and Sikarians wouldn't be villains in a traditional sense. They don't want Voyager to die. They just want to make their lives a living hell for the entertainment of their own people. So what I would do is have the Sikarians occasionally show up as a fly in the ointment behind the scenes, in giving away the location of Voyager to races that are pursuing them, like the Kazon or the Trabe or the Vidians, using their teleportation technology to be one step ahead of them, occasionally helping them out in some cases, and occasionally holding them back. I think this would be an interesting way to have the Sikarians frequently pop up, but they're doing it just for the ratings. They're doing it just for the ratings. Crew members may meet someone who's incredibly compatible with them on an alien world and begin a romance, only to find out that these people are largely actors who've been trained because they've been watching Voyager from afar for weeks now. So in a sense, the Sikarians can become a metaphor for the fans themselves and the audience themselves and our consumption of our hunger for consumption for media. I think it would make a fun kind of meta-analysis and a fun way to play with the villains. Now, while we're on the subject of Laban, his portrayal in this episode is really creepy as hell. I mean, this dude is constantly putting his hands on Janeway, constantly getting up in her personal space, constantly pulling on her and stuff. And it's really weird. And I know, I mean, that was 20 years ago. And I guess it's a sign of where societal norms have changed, because it comes across as creepy as fuck in this episode. But I think it's also them trying to, in a short period of time, translates that to Laban, Janeway is more of a novelty, a possession. And that's the kind of sexism that Star Trek doesn't show enough. Star Trek sometimes speaks of sexism just in the most stereotypical terms, like they do with the Kazon, but they don't show presentations of how sexism can take many forms, like Laban's fascination with Janeway. He treats her as a novelty, not as a full-blooded person. And so it's kind of weird that when you see a portrayal as just downright creepy as Laban, and did they have to make him a French speak? Did he have to have the French accent? That just really laid it on too thick with like the Pepe Le Pew of space. I was worried that Janeway was going to have a roofie dropped in her drink during every scene she had with this guy. But when we get to the portrayals of sexism in alien races, it's odd that no one speaks of the Sikarians this way. But the Kazon, it's one of the first things you hear from people is, oh, the Kazon are sexist. The Kazon are sexist. Well, yeah, they most certainly are. They're massively sexist, misogynistic in the paternalism and of their culture. But let's step back for a second and look at that compared to what? Are they sexist compared to the Federation? Well, now they are, but you have to consider that during the time of Kirk, women weren't even allowed to be Star Trek captains, as was demonstrated in the original series. So even the Federation in the 23rd, 24th century had a lot of work to do on that issue. For that matter, are the Kazon sexist compared to Klingons, where Even in the modern era on Deep Space Nine, a woman could not be the head of a Klingon house, uh, as House of Quark and Deep Space Nine demonstrated. Are the Kazon sexist compared to the Ferengi, where women in their culture weren't even allowed to wear clothes or earn profit, or I mean, to the point that, and granted, Ferengi culture is a parody of capitalism and sexism and all those things run amok. But I think it bears mentioning that Janeway and the Voyager's crew react to the sexism of the Kazon as if it's something they've never seen before. But clearly, with the exception of maybe Harry Kim, who's just out of the academy, they've encountered Klingons before. They've encountered Ferengi before. They've encountered other cultures that have this problem. And so it's odd that, once again, Janeway's reaction towards the Kazon is so pronounced and so laid on thick. I think it leads to some problematic places when you see how the other problematic ways the Kazon are coded on the show. So I just thought that was one thing that was that stuck out as odd to me. In fact, if you want to go as far as sexism, I would say the most progressive of the Star Trek cultures, you could say the Bajorans, who seem to have gender parity going deep intrinsically within their culture. Even some indications that the Bajorans in the past were matriarchal. And the Romulans. I've never really seen anything in the Romulans portrayal that suggests non-equality of the sexes. The Romulan commander from the Enterprise incident, it should be noted, was commanding a starship when her female counterparts in the Federation could not do the same. So one win for the Romulans there. So that's just what I want to talk. But share me your thoughts in the comments. Next video, we're going to get to the one I've really been looking forward to, which is the Great Vidian Conspiracy, in which I believe the Vidians are behind it all. So we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.